Tonight's presentation is from Carlyn Stewart. She is the instructional coordinator and archaeologist at Los Luceros Historic Sites. And I'm going to turn off my camera and let you take it away, Carly. I will stop sharing. Yeah, okay, and you're ready to go. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Well, hello. Like she said, my name is Carly, and we are here at Los Luceros Historic Site. I'm not sure if you've been there, but if not, we are located north of Española, which of course is north of Santa Fe. And we are in a tiny town called Alcalde, New Mexico. And Alcalde is very small, and Los Luceros Historic Site is 148 acres here. And again, if you haven't visited, we have apple orchards that are historic apple varieties. There are historic buildings, including a church or the capilla, the Victorian cottage, and the hacienda, which, if I flip my camera around, you might be able to catch a glimpse of across the way here. Here we go. So here you see the field, and just beyond that, you see a bunch of trees, and that is where the hacienda is. There, it's coming into view now. And so the latest, or the earliest date that we have for that building is 1775. So that gives you a little bit of context as to where we are and what we have here. You will hear the rooster chime in quite a few times because he wants to be center of attention. But in addition to the historic buildings and the apple orchards, we have fields and fields of alfalfa, and we are right on the Rio Grande. And so way behind me, you can see those trees, hopefully, and that is the bosque with the cottonwoods. And you can maybe make out a little bit of the mesa back there. And so that is Mesa Prieta. And Mesa Prieta has more petroglyphs than Petroglyph National Monument in Albuquerque. So just a little bit of context. And as I was speaking, we had a friend join us. This here is Josefina, and she is one of the stars of Los Luceros Historic Site. Which brings me to, not only do we have those historic buildings, the orchards, the fields, the river, we also have a lovely group of animals here. And so I'm going to turn my camera around and introduce you to some of the animals that we have here. So we have, of course, Josefina here, which is a miniature donkey. Hi, Josefina. And she is a sweetheart. She likes to make lots of noise when you walk into the area. She is a little stubborn. So if you try and close this gate over here, to close them in at night for protection, she will stand right in the middle of the gate. Won't you, sweetheart? And so now I understand why stubborn donkey is a term. I didn't know that before I met her. So we also have the goats, which are over here. We have 5 goats, 4 of which are mostly black with a little bit of white. And then right there, we have a white goat with a little bit of black, and her name is Oreo. And she is a sweetheart. She loves all kinds of pets. And she'll probably say hi during this talk later. And so as you see here, goats like to be on top of things. They like to climb. And so this is one of their favorite spots. And in the background, you can see a salt lick, which of course is for all of the animals to get a little bit more salt. And they just love licking on that thing. So then that brings us to some chickens that we have here. And we have, oh yes, and of course the rooster, which again, you will hear throughout this presentation. So we have a little chicken coop here with a few chickens. I believe we have probably 7 or so and 2 roosters. And again, as I'm talking, we have a couple visitors that want to say hello and be the center of attention. Hi, sweeties. So this one right here is Natia. Which of course is based on the New Mexico desert. And here, scratching his back on a tree, is Bizcochito. And so Natia and Bizcochitos are really the stars here at Los Luceros because they were hand bottle fed from birth. And so you can see they're very friendly. And actually, right before I started this talk, you guys, Natia got a chunk out of my notes. And so when they say goats and sheep can eat anything, they really try to. They really try to. But so these animals, we try not to let them eat anything, right? That is not good for their diets. But if I turn my screen around, you will see that some of them enjoy chomping on the leaves of these trees. So any of this low hanging sticks here, you can see are kind of bald. And so they enjoy eating the leaves, especially the goats. The goats you will see on their hind legs reaching for it, which is pretty funny. This, I believe, is a mulberry tree. And so they like the mulberries. We have a pear tree right there, which they enjoy. But their main diet, of course, consists of the grassy fields right there and the alfalfa. And so alfalfa is pretty cool here because this is one of the first places in the United States where alfalfa was ever grown, which is pretty cool. So this place really has just so much history to it. And I hope that our visitors, whoever is listening, will be able to come and take a tour, self-guided or guided in the future, and be able to see this place for yourself because it's pretty remarkable. Now, alfalfa, again, was grown here first hundreds of years ago and has been consistently grown here since, which is pretty impressive to have a space that has been used for agriculture for hundreds of years. Now, of course, before the alfalfa was grown, indigenous Tewa speakers lived in this area and they built field houses and did agriculture in these very fields. So again, extending that history back hundreds and hundreds of years. So this place has consistently been used for agriculture, which is super cool. And so at Los Luceros, we really try and keep that up. Right now, again, we have that alfalfa growing. And the really neat thing about the alfalfa growing here is that it feeds all these guys. So we grow and we harvest and we bale all the alfalfa here to feed these guys, which is pretty cool that it's very self-sustaining, which is very important in northern New Mexico, is, really living off of the land. And that is a tradition that has happened here at Los Luceros, again, for hundreds of years. So that's pretty neat. The alfalfa is still just being grown and then given to these guys when they are not taking chomps out of my notes. So back to Bizcochito and Natia and why they are so special. As I said, they were bottle fed when they were born. And that is because these little guys were actually abandoned. Hi, sweetie. Abandoned by their moms. And so these sheep, some of them just did not really know how to be a mother, or perhaps something with Bizcochito and Natia, I don't know, smelled different. We're not really sure why the moms weren't very good at taking care of them. But luckily, we were here to step in and make sure that these guys survived. And so Bizcochito and Natia were actually born in the dead of winter, you guys. And that's not really the best time to have tiny baby sheep being born. And when I say tiny, I mean they were so small, definitely less than a foot big as little baby sheep. And so again, here's Natia here. So Ethan Ortega, who is the manager here, they actually found the little babies. They didn't know that the sheep were pregnant, and they found the babies here right in this barn area. And so, they were abandoned by their moms. And so we had to bottle feed them for a couple months until they were ready to start, eating the alfalfa, eating the grass. And so that is why they're so friendly and personable, is because they're very used to humans. So if you ever come to visit Los Luceros, you might be able to meet Natia and Bizcochito. They are getting bigger and bigger by the moment. And again, they were born in the winter of 2019. So they are pretty much adults now. They were going through a very stubborn teenage phase, which I thought was only in humans, but apparently they're in sheep too. And Natia here used to like to jump on me. Now, something to know about sheep and why jumping on me might be a problem is their feet. If you have ever seen a sheep's foot, they are very, very pointy. So imagine that and a full, 100-pound or whatever they are sheep jumping on you. It's not fun. But really, they just like attention and they just wanted some treats or, again, some paper. So that's really kind of a long-winded introduction to Los Luceros, to the herd. And again, here is sweet Josefina, who is coming to say hello. But the question really becomes, why are these animals here? Why do we have a herd of 18 churro sheep, 5 goats, and a stubborn donkey, and a bunch of chickens? So that can be answered through the fact that this is a historic site. And as a historic site, we preserve and interpret the past. And so that gives you an indication that these animals have something to do with the past and are important to talk about and preserve and continue to interpret to today's audiences. So the introduction of domestic animals by the soldiers, colonists, and Franciscan missionaries changed New Mexico profoundly. So something to remember, something to learn is that, these sheep and these goats and donkeys weren't always here. In fact, there weren't any here before 1598. And so in 1598, the Oñate expedition was really the first European people specifically that came up here to set up a colony. And so, of course, there were other explorers kind of checking out the area, but they were here to colonize the area, make it a home. And in order to do that, you need some sheep friends. You need some animals with you to not only feed your army that is marching, but also to, set up a homestead to live here. But of course, the very, very important thing that we all need to remember is that people were already here. So in the area of Los Luceros Historic Site, there is a pueblo of Fiogue. And Fiogue was Tewa speakers who lived here and again farmed this land because we are right on the Rio Grande. And as I mentioned, that mesa back there, Mesa Prieta, has so many petroglyphs. So it is a very significant site for many indigenous groups. And so when the Spanish came, there were people already living here, already using this land. So that is always something important to keep in the back of your mind. So when Oñate came up with all of his people, he brought 7,000 heads of livestock. Now let me paint you a little picture over here. These animals are very cute and very sweet and very smelly. So I want you guys to imagine if you have any pets at home, if you have a dog or a cat, imagine if you didn't clean their litter box or didn't pick up the poo in your yard. That's really smelly, right? That's kind of like these guys right here. They have a smell to them, and we love them anyways. And sometimes they'll be in the rain and get a little shower. But imagine that smell in your mind times 7,000 animals. And so the reason I am making you think about this disgusting little exercise here is because there is a story that the indigenous people who were here actually smelled the Spanish before they saw them, because they had that 7,000 animals with them. So you could just kind of imagine this cloud of smell from these animals going up the Camino Real and smelling them before you saw them, which is kind of disgusting, but also very interesting. And so 7,000 heads of livestock, of course, required lots of food. And so imagine these guys. You see where we're standing right now, you can see it's all dirt. There's no grass here. And so 7,000 animals all eating up the Camino Real, really kind of it really kind of messed up the landscape. And so because you're eating, and that is something to remember too, is really the whole point of this talk is talking about balance, right? Is talking about how critical these animals became to people's livelihoods, but also how damaging they can be to the environment, and figuring out that balance. So, of that 7,000 heads of livestock, 3,400 of them were sheep. And so, the sheep that you guys see in front of you are called churro sheep or Navajo churro sheep. And we'll get into a little bit of their history in a second. But we don't really know how many of these animals made it to the final destination, which is the modern day Okeowinge, which is pretty dang close to where we are now here in Alcalde. So the final destination wasn't too far away from where we are now. Again, which is why it's important to have these animals here to kind of tell this history. And so, many of them died on the expedition. Many of them fed their soldiers because, of course, sheep and goat can be eaten by humans. And so we really don't know how many ended up here, but some did. And these animals, crops, food, and agriculture made their way all the way from Spain to the Caribbean to inland Mexico, up the Camino Real with Don Juan de Oñate to northern New Mexico in 1598. That is a huge expedition for these animals. And so that is really why, look, these guys are facing off here. Sometimes they get a little territorial and will butt heads, and sometimes they'll walk away peacefully. Especially Bizcochito and Atia. I see them bonking heads a lot of the time. But so that is really why Oñate is kind of credited with launching the livestock industry here in the Southwest. But the funny thing is, hi, sweetie. You got to make an appearance. Hello. I want to see if you guys will recognize Bizcochito and Atia at the end of this. So this one's Bizcochito. And Atia, you can tell the difference because he has orange freckles on his nose, and Bizcochito here has black freckles. He's giving you guys a real close up. Yep. So you can see their fur is actually growing, or their wool is actually growing in because they were just hand sheared a few weeks ago. I don't know why he's staring at my feet so intently. So the livestock industry here really didn't start too well. But something that's very interesting looking at the archaeology, and my background is archaeology, which of course is the study of people in the past based on their material culture, or their stuff. So we look at the physical remains, the things left over, and we study the people that used and created them. Hello, you just really smiling for you guys. Hi, sweetie. That's very cute. So the odd thing is, even though the livestock industry didn't start too well and a lot of the animals were dying, the Spanish never really switched to eating indigenous foods, such as hunted wild deer, rabbits, squirrels, or even catching fish. So they really, really wanted their livelihood of livestock to be their sustenance, even though the animals weren't doing too well. And so this goat here kind of looks a little scary, but she is just relaxing. There we go. Animals can do some pretty fun things on camera, and I think it's important to point out that they're fine. So why did Oñate bring the sheep and the goat and the donkeys? Donkeys. Hello, Rooster. Donkeys are pretty easy to figure out because they carry things, right? Maybe not Josefina, because Josefina is getting a little old, and she actually has a specific kind of disease where she doesn't process sugars very correctly. So you can kind of see she has a little bit of a slope in her spine. But luckily for us, Josefina is still a very happy donkey, and she still is enjoying, her sheep friends and staying outdoors and drinking and eating all sorts of stuff. So we just have to kind of keep an eye on her and make sure that she's doing all right. But so donkeys, of course, were the pack animals. They carried things. They can help with agriculture, with tilling fields. They can transportation. Man, that rooster's really going nuts, you guys. Hopefully you can hear me over the rooster. But oftentimes when you think about sheep, you think about how cute they are, right on cue. Good work, Biscochito. How fluffy they are. And think about instead of just how cute or fluffy, think about all the ways these animals changed how to do things. So again, human transportation, hauling heavy payloads of stuff, trade goods, all that, tilling the fields, turning the wheels for grinding grain. They just really changed all kinds of things here. But something I want to point out, of course, is that even though the world was significantly changed by them, it doesn't mean that the people here were lacking at all. It wasn't like, they couldn't survive without these animals being brought in, because as we know, if you have been to any archaeological site in northern New Mexico or anywhere in the Southwest, really, is you can see these massive buildings, Chaco, Mesa Verde, Pecos, all kinds of places. And all of that construction was done without the help of livestock. And, the people survived and thrived and are still living in New Mexico today based on their life ways. They were able to hunt, to fish, to utilize the natural environment, the things that were already here. So I think, again, that's where balance comes in, is that you have to balance, like, yes, livestock changed things, it oftentimes improved things, but also there was a lot of good already happening, a lot of things that were already going really well in this area. So again, it's that kind of balance. Plus, of course, with livestock is not all good and happy things, right? Oh, here we go. Oreo's coming to say hello. Hi, sweetie. You can see her little goat whiskers there. She's giving you guys a real close up. There we go. And so, yeah, so about like all of those massive buildings, the canals that were being done, all the irrigation was done without beasts of burden, without little Josefinas to help, which is pretty impressive on its own. But again, like I said, these animals didn't just change things for the better. They brought things such as infectious diseases, eventually led to overgrazing of the fields. Erosion was very common. You guys remember it. I showed you Biscochito's feet here. And even if you look at the ground, hopefully you guys can see some lines through here. You can see where they drag their feet. You can see that there's no grass in here. Again, that goat is fine. She's just being a weirdo. And so you can tell already just by looking around me that their feet are super damaging to the landscape. And so luckily, of course, we have all of these beautiful fields here. And, one way that we really try and tackle the damage that these animals can do is we have multiple fields for them to eat and live in. So here we have one field, which is the hacienda field, which they will eat a few times a week. And then back here behind this barn is another field that they can go into and eat all of the grasses that are in there. And so by doing that, by alternating the fields, we can kind of address some of those problems that sheep can cause, that overgrazing, that erosion. And not only that, those things in specific areas where the sheep are, but you have to think of the bigger picture too, and think about how long sheep have been here and how they've increased over time, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But they really changed the landscape of New Mexico profoundly. So instead of, just some sparse grasses, it really changed to this very scrubby juniper land, which is interesting to think because we think of New Mexico and oftentimes we think about that shrubby, barren juniper and cholla in certain areas. But before that, New Mexico was really more grasslands before the juniper and the cholla kind of took over. So it's interesting that these very cute, lovable animals had such an impact on the New Mexico environment. And with that, you know, comes lowered water tables. These guys drink a lot of water. Not only that, but they also lead to riparian degradation, which means the water areas around rivers, you see their feet can dig into the banks of those rivers, can collapse the dirt around it, all kinds of things. And so remember, again, it's that balance of how can we still help these animals thrive, give them happy lives, but also take care of our landscapes. Huh, Josefina? Yeah. All right. So let's get to the sheep and why we have these specific sheep here. So these are, again, the churro sheep or the churro Navajo sheep, or Navajo churro sheep rather. And so these were really domesticated, sheep generally were domesticated in the Fertile Crescent. And then they, there's a really fun story about how the sheep came to be here. And so when the Spanish were coming over and planning to colonize the area and planning to bring sheep, there's a little bit of a debate onto which breed of sheep to bring. And so in Spain, there were really two breeds of sheep that they were considering. And one was the Merino sheep breed. And the second was the churro sheep. So spoiler, I already ruined that story, but the churro win. But what's really funny is the Merino sheep actually were the sought after ones. They were so sought after that there was a guild or a group of people that came together to protect them. And there were actual like restrictions on taking the Merino sheep out of Spain and over to the New World, which is crazy. They cared that much about this breed of sheep. They're like, you cannot have any of these fancy sheep. And so the Merinos really were sought after because of their wool. It was luxurious, it was soft, it was lovely. Whereas the churro sheep have more coarse fiber, so they're a little rougher, rougher wool. But the cool thing is that these churro sheep were actually the perfect breed to have brought over to New Mexico. And I'll give you a couple reasons why. So, let's see, I'm turning around the camera. There we go. So they thrive on sparse grasses. And so, like I said, before we were taken over by the juniper and the cholla, it was, you know, a grassland. There was a lot more grasses, native grasses out there. And these guys thrived on that sparse grasses. They can withstand drought even better than cattle. And so that means if the area is going through a drought or they, you know, kind of like the Southwest is now, that we're not getting enough rain, enough moisture, these guys can actually survive it better than even cows can. Apparently, which I would not know firsthand, but apparently they make better mutton, which is sheep that people eat. But, you know, Opie's coming over here to make sure that I'm not going to eat it. He's like, no, Carly. I don't like the word mutton. Don't use it around me. Which is funny because you are also named after food. But so it makes more delicious mutton. And again, these guys are all protected. So we will not be eating any of the sheep of this herd. So you guys are safe. No reason to panic. Bizcochito. And their wool is harder and straighter. And so let me see if he'll let me check out his wool a little bit. Nope, that's because Josefina here is coming to say hello. But what that does is it is actually a lot better at holding pigments and so holding dyes. So a lot of you probably know that the sheep wool is used to create rugs, to create clothing, all that kind of stuff. And so their wool is even better at holding that that dye, which is pretty cool. And so many indigenous groups adopted the wool weavings, which is very important to the culture now. But very early on, this wool was used in weavings, which is pretty cool. And so archaeological evidence really kind of suggests that the colonial sites primarily used the sheep for meat. And so very early on in the 17th century, these guys were primarily eaten. But it's funny because their wool became such a substantial part of indigenous culture. Some groups, specifically the Navajo or Dene, became a really important part of their culture. And so that is why, again, we're harking back to that balance, because not only are these guys a part of people's livelihoods in terms of, eating, subsisting upon them, using their wool, donating it, selling it, that kind of thing, but also it's such an important part of Dene culture that these guys be protected. And so one cool thing that I think that historic sites does is at Bosque Redondo, they actually they breed and they donate the Navajo sheep to indigenous people, which is really great. So kind of, keeping that aspect thriving. And so these sheep were really more inclined, so the Spanish and indigenous people in this area were more inclined to raise sheep instead of cattle, which is interesting because now most of New Mexico livestock industry is focused on cattle. And that is really because of the environment, because of this dry shrub-covered grasslands. So then we have the goats, of course, and the story is very similar with goats. Goats came up with Oñate. Sweetie, you gotta stop playing like this. It freaks me out every time. And so they came up around the same time. Allegedly, there were 1,000 of them that came up to Okeawinge. And then, the Pueblo Revolt happened. And so in 1680, there was a Pueblo Revolt, and a lot of the animals were acquired or eliminated during the Pueblo Revolt. And so, this was a vestiges of Hispanic culture that were eliminated, religious items, that kind of thing, churches. But actually, to correct what I said earlier, actually the sheep were a very important exception. And so oftentimes during the Pueblo Revolt, the sheep were spared, they were taken into indigenous communities, and they were raised by them. So they weren't all removed during that time. They were actually very important. So then years later, when the Spanish come back to reconquer the area, Diego de Vargas brought 900 heads of livestock. 2 years later, he brought another 3,300 sheep that came north. And so, breeding these animals, herding the sheep was a super important economic pursuit among the colonists of Santa Fe. And this entire area. And so sheep herding really became very important to the economies. That is how people made money on these guys. And so here is some numbers that is really important to think about. Okay, so you remember how I said, what was it, 7,000 heads of livestock earlier? Oh, let's get that camera back. And so we flash forward through time to the 1800s, so a couple thousand years after these animals were originally brought here, or a couple hundred years, sorry. And in 1850, the numbers were 377,000 sheep in New Mexico. And that started out as like 3,000 sheep. So in that amount of time, 377,000. Now, because it was such a moneymaker for people, by the time it was 1880, which is only 30 years later, which is about how old I am almost, in my lifetime, the sheep went from, around 400,000 to almost 4 million sheep in New Mexico. 4 million of these sweeties roaming around the New Mexico landscape. Holy moly. So they really thought, the people that lived in New Mexico really thought that the sheep industry was where the money was going to be at. That is how New Mexico would make all the money. But as resistant as these guys are to drought, after that time, after the 1880s, became severe drought. And we're talking months of flooding and not enough rain. And the Rio Grande in many places actually ran completely dry. And so water was, you know, a huge, huge thing. And so here I have the statistic that in 1900, Albuquerque reported a third of an inch of rain during the summer rainy season. A third of an inch, you guys, that is like, I can't even, that much rain during the rainy season. Oh my gosh, like how did anybody survive that? That's crazy. And so 40% of the sheep were lost. And not only, you know, was it drought and not getting enough water, but there were all kinds of problems. There were scabies that can get foot rot, like all these really horrible, gross things, stomach worms, ew, head grubs, all that kind of stuff. And plus, not only that is the predators here. And so, sorry, I gotta fix my glasses. And so there were coyotes, and that is still a problem today. And so that's why you can see we are in this very enclosed, this fenced in area. And so we shut the sheep in here at night. Say that 5 times fast, shut the sheep in here at night to make sure that they are protected from the coyotes, the mountain lions, those kind of things that would come here and, you know, attack the sheep, and we want to protect them. So coyotes were a huge problem back then, just as they still are. People tried to take care of them by aircraft, poisoning, like horrible things. And again, the balance, right, is yeah, coyotes are not good to the livestock industry, not good to the sheep, and people make their money off of sheep, and so they want them protected. But coyotes, of course, are here. They live here. This is their habitat. This is where they always were. And so it is again about that balance of protecting the sheep that we have here, but also the coyotes and the native wildlife here. Last year, we actually had a mountain lion come visit, which was really exceptional, but also a little scary because we didn't want our sheep, you know, to become mountain lion food. So again, it's that balance. We don't want to kill off all the coyotes because they're very integral to the environment, to the ecosystem that we have here. And we want to protect these guys because look how cute and lovable they are. I can turn the camera around. All right. So these guys, like I said, 40% of them or so died off during this time. And, you know, Theodore Roosevelt, who was president, really promoted conservation during this time from 1901 to 1909. And so that kind of helped get things on track for the environment, making sure that people are taking care of the landscape so that it is preserved for future generations. And again, like I said, the way we're doing that here is we're having them alternate fields because these sheep, as cute and lovable as they are, hi, sweetie, they actually eat the grasses down to the nubbins. And so if you eat the grass too far down, they won't grow back again the next year. And of course, if the grass, oh, look at, there's a goat gonna scratch himself on this tree. Oh, nope. Sometimes they rub themselves on the tree and on the fence, and it's really funny to watch. You just really want some attention here. What's going on? It's kind of interesting. Every time I show the camera, he like bows down a little bit. But anyway, and so again, it is that balance because they do eat that grass all the way down to the nubbin, and we like the grasses here. We want them to continue to eat it for years and years to come. And so this area that we are looking at right now became really popular for horse racing, for dude ranching, for 4-H clubs. And so really a lot of this area became San Gabriel Dude Ranch. And so the Dude Ranch really was created to cater to the wealthy East Coast visitors who wanted to come and really play cowboy for a while. They wanted to kind of experience what ranch life was, what life was in the West. And that's what they did in this area. So when Mary Wheelwright purchased this property at Los Luceros Historic Site, she was originally out here checking out a dude ranch, and she went on an expedition to the Grand Canyon and back, which is so crazy. So this is a woman in, I want to say the 30s, that came and did an entire trip from here, right where we're standing, to the Grand Canyon. And she said she didn't cross a single fence. Just pretty interesting, because even here to the river, you'd have to cross 1, 2, 3 fences. But so she purchased this property after, you know, experiencing the dude ranch life and just falling in love in New Mexico. So today brings us all the way up to today. The focus in New Mexico is 98% of all livestock sales are from cattle, or the milk that cows produce. And so there has been a decline in the sheep numbers. And I wish I had the statistic, but during some time there was, oh, here we go. So churro sheep actually almost disappeared from New Mexico, and there were only 400 breeding pairs or breeding individuals in the United States. In the whole United States, only 400 breeding individuals. Can you imagine that number coming down from 4 million? So that is another reason why we take care of these animals and we preserve them and we interpret their history, because they almost disappeared from the United States. And so in the 1970s, organizations joined together to really recover the breed and start breeding programs, and they were officially designated the Navajo churro sheep. And so yes, the sheep really did the greatest damage. Here you can see, hi sweetie, hello, more kisses. You can see Natia here has that orangish dark color to his nose, and then Biscochito has the black spots. So if you ever come to visit, you can kind of recognize them that way. But so sheep, yes, did the greatest damage to the environment. Their hooves, their eating practices of eating grass down to the nubbins, all of that kind of adds up. But they are super important culturally. So it's all about that balance. Today, there are churro sheep at the New Mexico Farm and Ranch Heritage Museum, at Fort Sumner Historic Site. There are weavers that use the wool at New Mexico Fiber Arts in Espanola and Santa Fe. There's Tierra wolves, there's Chumayo weavers. There is still such a presence of these guys in New Mexico culture. So that is really why we interpret them. So there you go. You got like a crazy amount of history on livestock in New Mexico, probably more details than you ever wanted to know, but that's why they're here and that's why they're important. One other fun fact I wanted to say about these guys is they have what is called a polycerate gene. And what that means is they have multiple horns. And so if this guy will let me, he's a little skittish, but if this guy will let me, you will see that he has not 1, not 2, but 4 horns, and they kind of go out of his head like this, which is pretty neat. These guys can have 6 horns, which is pretty cool. But let's see if I can turn the camera around and see him. He is right in front of me, right here. You can see his 4 horns protruding from his head. Yeah, he's gonna walk away. But isn't that crazy? Have you guys ever seen sheep with horns out of their face like this? That's pretty neat. Most of our sheep here have curled horns. They usually only have 2. I think we have 1 brown one that actually has 4 that are all curled like this. And this one is named Unicorn because you can see the 1 horn is straight out from his head and he has 1 that curled under. So just some interesting facts about churro sheep. That polycerate gene is just super cool. 6 horns? What? So thank you all so much for joining me today at Los Luceros Historic Site to learn about the livestock here. And, hopefully we can do these presentations in person very soon. You can hopefully come and meet Biscochito and Natia and learn more about this amazing place. So I just wanted to thank PEEC so much for inviting me to talk today. It has been such a pleasure, and I would be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Carly, this was amazing. I learned so much and the animals are adorable. Thank you so much. You are always a great presenter. So we
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I don't know if Lori has any questions for you, but Lori, feel free to type them in the chat if you want or to unmute.
Hello, I'm Roy, her husband.
Hi,
Roy.
And this was terrific. We haven't been out to Los Luceros in many years, but when we did go out there, it is a fascinating, fabulous place. So I'm so glad that it's under such good stewardship, and the history of the animals was amazing. I knew a little bit, but this was just
Kisses, which are very cute until you smell. And it's a little less cute.
But this is terrific, and certainly we do want to get out there now that the pandemic is letting us do a few things. So hopefully we'll be an open house or an opportunity to get out there. What is the situation on visitors now at Los Luceros?
Yeah, so we are open, and we actually have been open since February. So we are open Thursday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Except this Sunday, we actually do the first Sunday of every month, we do a dawn till dusk day. And so people can come at 6 in the morning and stay all the way until I think 8 p.m., which is pretty cool. It's really nice to see the site in different times of day, see the different birds, that kind of thing. But yeah, so we are totally open to the public. You can go inside the historic buildings. You can ask us for good spots to swim in the river. There's picnic benches everywhere. It's really a spectacular place. I will tell you that bug spray is pretty important. Not only are we right on the Rio Grande, but we also have acequias running water, watering our fields and our orchards all the time. So mosquitoes are a little bit of an issue, but nothing our sheep can't handle. Yes, please come and visit. Soon we'll be giving actually guided tours and all that kind of stuff, and have programs. The best way really is to just follow our Facebook, Los Luceros Historic Site, or our website, and we update all the time.
Great, we will do that, and we will definitely come visit you folks.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, and I've enjoyed it totally.
Thank you so much. It was really fun to give to you. So I'm glad that you signed up.
good. And this will be up on our website, our YouTube page in a week or two after we get it all ready to go up there. So hopefully lots more people will get a chance to see it, because this was a fantastic evening. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you so much.
I hope it
Have a good one.
Raining there now. It held off long enough.
Yes, now it's just the sweaty and gross part of it. So let's hope for some rain.
All right, well, have a great night, Roy and Carly. Thanks for being here. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.